Welcome back to the show. It's now time for Hard Talk. I mentioned earlier, Professor Kwesi Aning is here as my guest this morning. He's a security consultant. Prof, you said by and large, in the spirit of democracy, everything has been okay. But we're witnessing a lot of tension. We're witnessing a lot of chaos. We're witnessing needless deaths, besieging of state installations. Were you surprised by all of this?
No, far from it.
Really?
Violence is a currency in Ghanaian politics. And the more violent you are, whether in terms of your words or the actual perpetration of violent acts, if your party wins an election, then it becomes a very profitable investment. You know, you get given a job. So in that sense, I knew it would happen. I'm neither also surprised by the scale of it.
Okay.
It is the failure of our security assessments that is creating the impression that this is new, and the unwillingness or otherwise of those who are in charge of our security to crack the whip that is dragging this. But otherwise, I mean, these are criminal actions, and they need to be responded to.
But Prof, in 2016, we spoke about this. A lot of looting, a lot of tension, a lot of things that was very un-Ghanaian for us. And we said we didn't want to see it again. The people that condemned it, the people who are the receiving end, are now dishing it out to others. Is it that we never learn as a country?
Learning is not a strong point for this country. But let me go back to a word that you use that I think it's interesting. The un-Ghanaianness of indiscipline.
Yeah.
There's nothing, actually, I would say it's very Ghanaian.
Really?
No, look at this country. Road traffic regulations, probably one of the highest road traffic deaths and injuries anywhere in this world. Listen to our language: abusive, intimidating, disrespectful, corrupt. So corrupt that corruption is now the glue that binds this country together. So the notion of Ghanaianness as hospitable, honest, loving, supportive, probably previously gentle, is gone. Pastors are lying through their teeth, prophesying as to who will be president, and when they fail, and when they fail, they come with funny excuses. People promising us they will commit suicide if this party wins. You know, we've elevated stupidity and indiscipline to be a hallmark that we respect and adore. Students want to bribe their lecturers. They want to give their dissertations to contractors to write for them. And these are senior people in public life. You know, so the notion of Ghanaianness as what we thought we were is gone. So those who have taken up weaponry to misbehave are actually following what is the norm in Ghanaian society. If we go back a year and a half, 2 years, with the exception of Mr. Mahama himself and Dr. Baumia, who did not use language that was intimidating, disrespectful, abusive, almost all party officials used phraseology that glorified violence, and that sent a clear signal that any means necessary to win is acceptable. What they forgot was that when you pump this narrative into people's minds, you've also got to come back and deconstruct it.
Sure.
Otherwise, irrespective of the outcome, the boss has said it and we will continue. What is happening, and I've called it, the president has called it criminal enterprise, which I think is a very fascinating and apt description, because it is not the supporters of one party who are doing this.
Oh, you think so?
Oh, yeah, no doubt. These are opportunistic partnerships. But what did ordinary people gain in the last 8 years? If I can strike a blow against the state and go away, I will do it. And therein lies the need to crack the whip very quickly. Otherwise, from the 10th of January, it's going to get considerably worse.
Really?
Much worse. This is not rocket science. The Vigilante Act, Act 999, was not a particularly well thought through act. Those who had used violence and instigated violence to get into power then decide that, well, we are now in power, so violence as a tool to get political power and as a currency should not happen again. That was naive politics and naive calculus. Because when your supporters seized toilets, lorry parks, government offices, hospitals, and looted. I mean, and I think there is a video trending of the then MPP chairman, I think Mr. Blay or something.
Freddie Blay, yes.
Yeah, and I think probably it would be good to play it. When senior political operatives interpret violence and its use as appropriate in their quest for power, it sends a very dangerous signal. So what is happening now has happened over and over and over again. But what I'm surprised about is that, you see, when people say the president-elect should call his supporters to order, yeah, that is all he can do. And that is all that he has done. The instruments of authority and decision-making and the responsibility to ensure we are safe still lies with the incumbent government.
Yeah.
And they cannot and must not shelve that responsibility, because it's going to be 3 very long weeks before the night or the dawn
of January 7th.
Of January 17th.
We've seen, I ask about un-Ghanaianness because hitherto, yes, we see these political parties go at each other, but to touch an EC office, even when the ballot boxes are still in there, the reprisals towards the Electoral Commission, is it the delay in the collation of results that we're seeing, the ripple effect, or the seeming political shift?
No, Lily, this goes way beyond the EC, the Ghana Gas Company. I think they wanted to attack it. I think the police officer of Wenchi has been hurt badly, his car destroyed. This is an attack against the state.
Okay.
This goes way beyond politics. This is channeled fury and criminality that the state of Ghana must clamp down, and clamp down decisively. I think you mentioned that 107 arrests have been made.
Yes.
There's this project called, I think, the Adelphi project. I think we have about 22,000 CCTV cameras all over Ghana. So national security has all the pictures. So I'm surprised only 107 people have been arrested. We need to combine the forces of the Ghana Police Service, National Security, with the cameras from the Adelphi project, and then the judiciary, and to double quick punish people, to serve as a deterrent after President Mahama has lifted the sword of state, that he will clamp down even more against people who misbehave. So I think the state itself, the Ghanaian state, is failing itself and people by playing this game, this blame game. I'm hoping that when incoming President Mahama and I think outgoing President Akufo-Addo meet today to start the transition, process, both of them with one voice will say no. This will not be accepted. It is unacceptable, and we will see the law enforcement agencies doing what needs to be done. But Lily, the Ghana Armed Forces has also issued a statement.
Yes.
Let me try to explain what that statement means.
Okay.
When you strike a blow against the state and you threaten the existence of the state, it is not the police that is used to repel that threat. It is the army. And the army does not negotiate. So I think the warning is clear. I know post Ashaman and Edra and Wa and Senyabreku, the army would want to walk a very thin line and not use, although they've promised to use lethal force when you attack them. I think they will still try, except they are provoked very much. So those who want to try it, please feel free and try. Not true, because you see, immediately we send a signal that we are incapable. Who wants to bring his money to Mr. Mahama's administration?
Nobody.
When they are not safe. Money is sensitive. Money responds to situations where it's stable, predictable, and functional. So those who think they can steal an air conditioner, take some chair or laptop or computer, or out of frustration want to burn a building, you go to prison. And I can assure you, Lily, if national security does not use those 22,000 CCTV cameras, then we are in trouble. And they should be hauling people before the courts, latest by Friday.
Some have also said that this is past shift in our security apparatus. Is that what is evident now?
Oh, but the shift will happen. I mean, the president has probably, about 5,000 to 10,000 jobs to give away? The shift will happen. But it is unacceptably incompetent when the shift has not taken place to decide you will not perform. No. There are no lacunae in government business. So, yes, it is routine that certain decisions are made, and some people will naturally lose their job, others will go to prison. I'll come to that. But until you have been changed, you've got to deliver.
Sure.
Otherwise, you are putting even yourself into more trouble. And the notion that I may be changed and therefore I will not work. I mean, that is not only incompetent but criminal, because you are by refusing to perform your duties and responsibilities, you are putting people's lives at risk. Yeah. So there's absolutely no excuse why people should not.
Has the outgoing government become powerless in this situation?
It seems so, but it ought not be. No, I mean, the defense minister is in office.
Sure.
He was one of the lucky few to have to have won his seat. The interior minister
Even
is
though
in office.
he's going.
Oh yeah, sure. But he's still the defense minister. The interior minister is still the interior minister. Mr. Kandapa is still the national security minister. The National Security Council is still in place. So all the security institutions are in place. They are still functioning. Their heads have not been changed. So there is absolutely no excuse to allow what is happening to happen. But I'm looking forward to President-elect Mahama and outgoing President Akufo-Addo meeting today and after the conversations around the transition with one voice, condemn what is happening and instruct the security forces to do what is necessary.
We've also heard of threats on some government officials. Should these things not cease by now? I mean, the law is the law. The law will take its course. President Mahama, now President-elect, has stated that, well, we will set up oral operation, recover all loot, right? We'll set up functioning institutions to deal with acts of corruption. If there is supposed perception of corruption, why do people, the nationals in themselves, go after government officials? Why are you threatening government officials? Why not allow state institutions to work?
Emotional hurt sometimes makes us unreasonable in our actions.
Right.
So quite a number of these people who are threatening government officials, which is absolutely not acceptable and deplorable, are people who think they've been hurt and treated in a particular way. And I think there are lots of people, Lily, who have been deliberately targeted, their careers destroyed, businesses hit. So there's a lot of pain out there. But I think that pain is best assuaged through legal processes and institutional processes. I think people are reluctant to wait because institutions have been hollowed out, that we do not trust institutions, and people do not believe they will get justice from our institutions. And that is very dangerous. And therein lies the hope in the word reset. But we've heard these nice words before. In 2000, we heard about positive change. The change certainly did not trickle down to ordinary people. And we've heard other highfalutin slogans before also. So I think what we are seeing is a reflection of the frustrations that people have had for a long time. The sense that their rights have been trampled upon and abused, and therefore this is the time to strike back. All that we can say is that hope is probably one of the best weapons that we have, that those that we have invested our hope in to govern will do what is right. And I think President-elect Mahama and his advisors can already begin to feel the weight of responsibilities that Ghanaians have placed on them. I listened to him this morning. I think his church elders came to congratulate him.
Yeah.
And he was talking about that. Yes, he had hope that he will win, but not this margin. We've almost turned Mr. Mahama overnight into a powerful emperor. And therein lies, and I think your choice of word this morning, sapient, intelligent, and wise, is very apt.
Okay.
Because now he has the power to do whatever he wants. Actually, we can tell the MPP members of parliament, why don't you go home and drink tea? We will still pay you. And the business of government will go on.
We'll continue anyway.
Yes. And they realize the potential danger and threat to democracy.
Right.
So sapient is a word that I hope you will be throwing around in this studio more often. And I think when Ms. Mukhtari comes in, I think you would need to reassure us that sapient will be a word that a lot of their actions will revolve around. Okay, so history is beckoning, and Mr. Mahama will be looked up to deliver the expectations and the hopes of people. Because I remember clearly in 2016, a day or two before the elections, and President Kufuor's last campaign message, I think he spoke in Twi, appealing to Ghanaians to trust him and to vote for him, that he's a successful man. I think was the phrase. And I think were we to go out there and ask whether that trust that we reposed in him and the administration have been fulfilled, I think the electoral results are indicative of people's evaluation of that administration.
Now let's evaluate President Kufuor's presidency.
Yeah.
Prior to him coming, the Third World War that he seemingly went into, won that war. He coming into office, 8-year span. What would be your thoughts about President Kufuor in terms of being handling the security apparatus of the state?
I think on a scale of 1 to 10, in which 10 is the highest mark, I think about 2.5. Yeah.
Is that not very uncharitable?
Well, if you ask my students, they'll actually tell you it's very charitable.
Really? Why would you say so?
Why wouldn't I say so? Now, if you look at what has happened in the last 2-3 days, it ought not to have happened. We have the Vigilante Act, Act 999. I mean, we have a panoply of rules and regulations and laws that should not let what has happened happen. So, how come we haven't had vigilantism since, is it 2020 or 2021? No, since 2017, thereabout. It's because it's the same party that has been in power.
Exactly.
So I think it's a disastrous failure of our capacity to do the intelligence assessment, to know that immediately there's a shift. And these are assessments that you do prior to an event, so that you have different options for response.
Yeah.
And one of the options for response was to say, look, were the government to change, how will people react? Because when governments have behaved in ways that people feel they've lost the joy of living, then the assessments are that those governments will be abused, sometimes physically attacked. And it happens all over the world. I remember, I think in 2020 or 2021, I had just done a major assessment of the April 19th bombings in Sri Lanka for the UN. And around that time, if you remember, there was a lot of trade union agitations in Ghana, and people were expressing surprise on the government side. And I said, no, but if you do your work well and you do the assessments well, this shouldn't come as a surprise. A government minister called me, threatening me, I'll sack you, do you know who I am? And
sack you?
Yeah. I mean, if you are I think that should be one conversation altogether about the threats and intimidation the last 8 years and what I have lost. But that's a conversation for another day.
I'm sure viewers would want to know, but you complete your sentence, then I'll ask you about it. Not just on you, but on people in general.
But a surprise to me during that conversation was this minister saying, oh, do you want this place to become like Sri Lanka? So there was an awareness around 21, 22 that things were not going well. So I jokingly told them, look, actually, I've just done a major assessment as to why the terrorist bombings happened and the riots happened for the United Nations about Sri Lanka. You know, so if you like, I can send you the report. But I also realized that, look, it was a waste of my time sending the report to anybody. So my driver, every time we reached that particular spot on the way to Takrady, he said, hey, this is where the man called and threatened you. You know, but we started by talking about democracy and the need to work to sustain it. I mean, for me, there was no problem at all in terms of continuing to write and to speak. So the 2.5%, I think, is a very generous mark because we saw the way Dre happened, we saw the way Sherman happened, Ayawaso West Wagon was the epitome of how security governance had collapsed in this country. Because we saw these people come out, brutalize Ghanaians, a commission of inquiry established, and all the security chiefs said, we don't know where these people came from. There's a parliamentary committee on defense and interior. We have the public accounts committee. We have the finance committee. We have the attorney general's office. All these committees are those, they are what we call the committees having the power of the purse. They fund these institutions. So where did these guys get their monies from? Where did they get their weapons from? The vehicles, their clothing. Okay? And for a powerful committee chaired by Emil Short, with members of Professor Henry Temensa Bonsu, now a Supreme Court judge, and then Kwesi Aning, a former IGP. The government just rubbished the report. Okay, so it's key that even in situations where there ought to have been some openness, some acceptance of failure problem, you know, it was not done. But nevertheless, you know, Ghana is a resilient country. Our communities are strong. Our communities are hardworking. And I think we will be able to go beyond this temporary tensions and fights and continue to be a strong, resilient country.
Is our democracy under siege?
No.
It's not?
No. It's because we've wasted time in responding.
Okay.
You know, when you talk to the armed forces, they'll always tell you, allow us, give us the orders, and we will get it done. So I can sense the frustration that, you know, their hands are tied behind them, and then they've been sent in to fight. And it's the same story with the galamsey, you know. So the 2.5, Lily, if you push me, probably I might bring it down. No. Look at the deliberate destruction of our water bodies and our lands. We are the only country that hasn't gone to war, but out of greed and crass stupidity have destroyed our water bodies. You know, so
at what point did we lose the war on galamsey?
I think it would be different. I can't sitting here point to a particular time period. I think the experts like Steve Mantiao and Samuel Bekwe might be able to point out. But if you look at the explosion in the licensing regime in the last 3 years, 4 years, Probably in the last 8 years or so. Yeah. Because when, by the time,
Does it then suggest that all the efforts do not yield any results by this government?
all the efforts were not sincere.
Okay.
Absolutely
How
not sincere.
How so?
You know, when you come to my class, my role as a teacher and as a leader is to impact or to impart knowledge. If I fail to do that, there are no excuses.
Right.
We have had multiple operations, and the military people will tell you that had we been given free hands, we would have dealt with this. We would have dealt with this and quashed this once and for all. No, but there's never really been the sincerity around the fight against this massive destruction of our water bodies. And here it's not only about the government, to be fair. The legislative instrument that allowed people to go into the water bodies was supported also by the other side. You know, so it was a joint decision. You know, so Mr. Mahama has also some hard decisions to make. Their manifesto promises around galamsey seems very well thought out. Dr. Obin knows what he's talking about very clearly. But I think we need, as civil society, you know, to continue to encourage them, to criticize them, to come with some other options, you know, so that hopefully we can turn what is increasingly staring at us that threatens our very existence.
You talked a while ago about acts of threats and intimidation.
Yeah.
Were you threatened? You mentioned that the minister,
Oh,
beyond him.
Oh, consistent. I mean, nothing for me, it became a routine part of my work. You know, from the major baseline survey about small arms in this country that we did, to even have the conversation. I mean, there was never any time I appeared on radio or television that I didn't get some threatening call. But I don't want to make the conversation. I think today is about Ghana. But I will show you letters. You know, my wages were reduced, all sorts of things. You know, but I will not leave. This is my country. I have a right to be here. I have a right to speak, and I have a right to write.
Was it something you were doing against government, you think?
No. Do you think this conversation is against government?
No, not at all.
So, but you know, when people are extremely sensitive and democracies require that, particularly for those of us who have been educated with the taxpayers' money, from the fisherfolk, from the farmers, from the street sweepers, from the woman roasting coffee broke man, that we bring that knowledge and that elitist training back into society to contribute to. But we have a political class across this continent that thinks that we should all be part of the ruling, governing, looting class. But it's not everybody who thinks that way. Some of us must be on the other side to be able to keep check on those who govern. And I think it's a legitimate thing to do. No. I'm a relatively cautious person, you know, but I also not be pushed around. So if something happens, I will speak about it.
In light of what you're talking about, some analysts say President Akufo-Addo ran a seemingly authoritarian regime. Would you agree?
Well, certainly the space for civil society engagement over time became narrower and narrower and narrower.
What should President Mahama do when he comes into office, his first 1 year?
Well, he's giving himself 120 days. So probably we should start.
Especially for the security apparatus.
Yeah.
What should be his focus?
Well, when you say the security, then you are talking about the institutions.
And the entire security of the nation.
Yeah. So let's start with the entirety of the nation. And I want to locate this conversation within this 120 days social, is a contract?
Yes.
Yeah. In that social contract, he promises to make some inquiries into some, projects and contracting issues. And I think there's a tall list of some of the institutions and contracts that he would want to look into. Security is about securing jobs, housing, health, education. So President Mahama, in the first 120 days, must begin the process of saying everyone who was part of these companies, because we need to do a thorough investigation based on the rule of law. Kindly hand over your passport to national security so that until you are cleared, then you can go back for your passport and travel. Because we need to retrieve our monies, our properties, and those who need to go to jail must go to jail. That will dampen the general sense of frustration, anger, the sense that we have lost out in the last 8 years. And part of the violence that we are seeing and the unacceptable violence and attacks against state property and individuals stems from this notion that some people have used their positions to acquire wealth inappropriately. Then comes the institutional process of rebuilding, of appointing people. Several months ago, Emmanuel Kwesi and myself and a few others, I can't talk about this because the case is still at the Supreme Court, to give us an interpretation of the president's powers in terms of chopping off the heads of all security institutions upon the coming to power of a new president. I know President-elect GHOne Mahama does not agree with the position that we took. That, if I'm a president and I cannot appoint my own security chief, then what kind of president am I? So he will do that. The Ghanaian Armed Forces has been fairly retooled over time. And I think he will continue. Housing is a big problem. Issues around further training, education has been going on. He will need to speed it up. But more importantly, is to give what we call the Fusion Center and other analytical aspects of the statutory security agencies the free hands to do the assessments.
Why?
In the last 5-6 years, we've allowed our partners to determine what the security threat is. So they've been telling us, the terrorists are coming from the north, they are coming. But the problem is within. What is happening here is not done by some terrorists from Al-Qaeda or Islamic State. So I think Mr. Mahama would need to clamp down on this crossing of our legs and everybody telling us what our security, problems are. But he also needs to rebuild the intelligence.
Why?
Because in the last 6 to 9 months, the intelligence services have been used basically to run, pools as to whether what people think about government and whether they will win or not.
Is it their mandate?
No.
Some have argued that, well, the intelligence agencies like the NIB do a lot of these researches, so it's nothing new.
For what purpose? Because if they had listened to the NIB, because they were using the Kobo Collect, so they knew specifically the time and place where Lily said, you are doing a great job and we will vote for you. But people told the National Intelligence Bureau guys doing the work the truth. And when the truth came to headquarters and they didn't like it, they told the personnel, go back until you get us what we want. That is not what you use your national intelligence services for. So...
Should we relook at the whole idea of the BNI now NIB? Should we have a critical relook at it? Because very often it is job for the boys that we see across the board, both the NDC and the NPP.
See, I've always had this notion that jobs for the boys simply threatens the regime in power that does that. That sees its security institutions as a place to dump its political supporters.
Right.
Because one of the few places that you don't want to tinker with relates to those who will protect you when you are in danger.
True.
Okay? Now when I travel around this country, and I can tell you a lot of our politicians don't know this country, except when they are doing a little campaign. I've met people at barriers who cannot read.
That is the truth on the ground.
I've met people who have stopped my official vehicle with a big crest on it, and they are still demanding bribes. And I asked the guy, please, have you looked at both the license plate and the crest? It doesn't mean anything to you. Now, when you reduce your security institutions to that level, then you are threatening not only yourself and your government, but also the state as a whole. So I hope that there will be some gathering of people, experienced people, to think through, together with some of the serving people, to think through the new directions for rebuilding these institutions, making them more efficient, and also responding to the ever-changing threats.
Why?
Because what is happening now, doesn't look too good in terms of how the international community is looking at us. We had a very successful Saturday, all the way until Sunday. Dr. Baumia gave this very mature statesmanly concession. President-elect Mahama responded in a very, positive manner. President Akufo-Addo called President-elect. So the processes were going on as smoothly as mature democracies do. But somebody dropped the ball on the intelligence assessments as to how supporters from both sides would behave. So,
did the intelligence gathering then fail us?
Yes, it did. Because, if you ask Albert Yelyang of WANEP,
yeah.
You ask Emmanuel Bombande. For those of us who have followed political violence in this country and vigilantism and transitional politics, or Professor Jampo, or Alidu, this is not a surprise. So for us to sit and allow it to happen, and for lives to be lost and properties burnt, only that in this country nobody's ever sacked, for failures. But this is a great disaster for us.
Should this be a test case?
For who? For Mahama?
Yes.
Well, I think he's indicated that people should stop. But he's also thrown the ball back at the government. That he doesn't, they are still holding the instruments of power, so they should use it. My assessment from his statement so far, and I think it's giving him some warning also of what can happen when he takes over power, is that he and his team will be prepared. They must be prepared necessarily to clamp down where people to take the law into their own hands.
Now, let's look at the election. You talked about the election. Were you particularly surprised about the outcome?
No.
Why?
Two things. Already by 2020, even before the 2020 elections, the anger was palpable.
Right.
I did a major study together with two people titled, what is it, a conflict development analysis or something? And we traveled primarily in the 6 northern regions. And the feedback was clear. There was a sense of frustration that all these economic interventions were nothing than some fluke of some sort. Then in 2022, went back, traveled around the same 6 northern regions, did some interviews in Accra, but that was related more to the developments that could lead to the rise of extremism. You know, how can structural problems turn people to support, radical groups? And if you look at people's access to potable water, electricity, where they got their main news from, employment, access to medical health, the distance to the medical facilities, it was an absolute disaster. So the indices were there. Okay, but people just did not want to look at it. And leaders also wanted to be told sweet stories. So those of us who said, look, I don't have an interest, I'm a retiree. But there was this reluctance to listen to alternative views. And Lily, one of the things I know also in this country is that when people within the ruling government also know that things are not going well, the monies voted for campaign I hardly used in full. I think I was discussing with a senior member of the NDC, and he said, "Oh no, we have also been there before. I know what I'm talking about." So sometimes you vote 100 cedis for some activity, but people will use 12 because they know that irrespective of what you do, the outcome.
Are you sure they knew that this election was not going in their favor?
They knew.
Okay.
I think I have too many of my former students in senior positions who I spoke to, who were they themselves knew that they hadn't done well.
What then did they miss in this whole governance puzzle?
Arrogance. The arrogance of power. Turned previously humble, sensible, approachable people into something else. People that we teach with started from the civil society side, and power changed them. And
they say power is tricky.
Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And therein lies my appreciation for President-elect Mahama's statement when he gave his inaugural response. That I think he cautioned the supporters to beware that what has happened, if they don't work well, will also happen to them.
Exactly.
And I thought it was a very apt, statement. Yeah. We don't learn. You asked about the learning.
Yes.
We don't learn. Because I remember...
Are they likely to repeat the same mistakes?
Oh, definitely. You and I will be sitting here. That is, if I can walk up your staircase. I'll be very happy to come here. We will have the... Because, look, in 2000, the NDC was such a mammoth political operation. Huge. I mean, their rallies were just mind-blowing. They lost. And I remember the day that President Kufuor was inaugurated. You know, some ceremony was done in front of the Parliament House, but it was too small, so they had to cross over to the Black Star Square. And everybody left, and it was left with President Rawlings and his wife. And you could see the surprise. You know, Mr. Kufuor came, re-energized politics, you know, gentle giant, you know, and then the loss. You know, so we just don't seem to get a hang of what Ghanaians want. And this sense that, yes, we will give you power, but you've got to hold it well. You've got to treat it with the sapient behavior that we expect you, you know. And in my old school, we had this song, "Mankind like an egg," that the human being is like an egg.
What is that?
Where do you think? I went to fast food school.
I am not surprised.
You're not surprised. You know, that power is like an egg. You squeeze it hard, you will break it. You've got to hold it deftly. Otherwise, when it leaves your hand, hits the floor, it will also break. We are not good learners. Ghanaian politicians are the most fantastic history teachers. They are good at pointing fingers, but they are very poor history students. So the 2.5 mark is very apt and fair.
You think history will not be kind to President Akufo-Addo?
We will wait for the historians to write. We'll wait for the historians to write. But if the conversations that have taken place, even amongst its own parliamentary representatives, then we can already begin to see the writing on the wall and what the conclusions will be.
Now that you talk about parliamentarians, let's look at the current picture of over 180 in the NDC. Now over 180.
Over 180?
Yes, in the NDC.
Okay.
And about 85, well, still we're still waiting for more constituencies. Yeah. So about 85, 86 for the NPP.
Yeah.
What does this picture paint?
Well, it paints multiple pictures. But let me go back and talk, not so much, yes, we will come to the numbers. But Lily, you know, since 1992, every parliamentary cycle loses about 30, sometimes 40% of the incumbent MPs. And particularly for the 8th parliament, you know, there were all these problems in turnout to the political parties. So people decided that, look, I won't be run at all. Some lost their primaries. Some decided to become independent. So by the time the elections were held December 7th, probably just about 60% or a little less of the old MPs were going for re-election. If you take the normal attrition rate of about 30-40%, and we've seen some really very big names fall, then on the 7th of January, we are going to get a new parliament in which probably 65 to 70% may be first-timers.
Sure.
What that means is that the legislative process will be slow in the beginning. They would need to learn. They would need to understand that the power in the house is the mace, that when they are waxing lyrical, they cannot turn their back. You know, so we have a lot of work to do. We've been working with the Mines and Energy Committee. We've been working with Defense and Interior. And it's almost like going to the drawing board now from January 7th. So I think there's a lot of work. The 180-85, I think the one...
It's more than that, actually, about 185.
Yeah, so the 180, 185...
no, 180, 85.
Okay. So the 180 is almost about 2/3, right?
Yes.
Good. Now, the framers of the Constitution, I don't think they ever dreamt that one party would get 2/3.
Overwhelming majority.
And therein lies the need for maturity, for empathy, for sensitivity, and for alternative forms of political participation and engagement. And here, civil societies, specialized interest groups, but the fourth estate must become extremely nuanced, objective, critical actors. Lily, you know from the Afrobarometer report that law enforcement has had some difficulties with trust.
Yeah.
The judiciary has, you know, so the fourth estate, the media, now will have to play probably an inordinately important role. The question then is that issues of media ethics, professionalism,
and media ownership.
Then comes to the fore. You know, so although we have this parliament and a powerful new president coming into office, I think those of us on the other side of the aisle must begin the process of engagement very quickly.
Okay.
But because of the sensitivities and power, as we said earlier on, you know, absolute power is a dangerous thing, potentially dangerous thing. So we need that engagement that is nuanced, factual, objective. And as I've always said, you know, under President Mahama, I never lost sleep when I criticized him. But he didn't have absolute power then.
Exactly. Now he has absolute power.
Now he has absolute power. And I know this will get to him. I will continue to criticize him. And I'll continue to look forward to going for my walks with my dogs. And also sleeping and sleeping well. And waiting for the birds to come flying by and singing for me to wake up and have my first pot of coffee. But I know some of the people around him will be very irritated. They will be angry. But that is not my problem. It's their problem.
Okay.
Because by keeping his toes to the fire, he becomes a better president.
Absolutely.
And I think he naturally is a tolerant person, listening to different views. So we look forward as civil society in continuing that engagement.
Okay.
And I think it will be good for Ghana.
Okay. Thank you very much for coming, Prof.
Thank you.
It's been such a wonderful season and a wonderful period. That's Professor Kwesi Aning. He is a security consultant.